I'd just like to start off by asking you about the timing of this unrest, of this violence, because Parliament passed the controversial citizenship law mentioned in that report a little while back in December. So why are we seeing this violence now?
Well, since December, you've had a relatively straightforward and consistent demonstration going on in Shaheen Bagh in Delhi and then in many other towns in India as well. These were completely non-violent demonstrations in which women had taken part in large numbers. This became far more volatile when the BJP, especially its leader, Mr. Amit Shah, also the Home Minister of India, as well as leading BJP politicians in Delhi, began to use the Shaheen Bagh protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act as part of their as part of the campaign for the Delhi state elections, which have only recently concluded. During that period, Mr. Amit Shah made highly provocative speeches where he said that each and every vote for the BJP will pass an electric current through the demonstrators. One of the prominent BJP politicians, Mr. Kapil Mishra, led mobs in Delhi as part of his election campaign where he promised to shoot dead everyone who was involved in this particular movement. The Minister of State for Finance, Mr. Anurag Thakur, also led mobs in shouting, slogans that the demonstrators would be killed. And another member of Mr. Modi's, ministry, Mr. Parvesh Verma, made threatening statements. So what we now saw, if we just look at where these incidents of killings of Muslims have taken place the most in North and Northeast Delhi, these were areas that were focused by the BJP with highly inflammable speeches from top BJP ministers and politicians in the run-up to that particular election. And so what we see is a pent-up anger of the BJP supporters who have lost the election very badly in Delhi and effectively taking it out on the Muslim residents of these relatively poor parts of the city.
So in a way, if I understand what you're saying correctly, then the Prime Minister who's appealed for peace, his party is partly responsible for actually the violence we've been seeing.
I would say much more than partly responsible. This was promised as what would be done. It is actually quite ironic that at the same time that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump were at Mahatma Gandhi's ashram in Gujarat, as the apostle of peace and so forth, that his party people were involved in these in acts of violence. You have on video sitting members of the Delhi Legislative Assembly from that particular party, from the BJP, who are leading mobs in parts of Delhi. So the complicity of the BJP in the violence cannot be excused or overlooked. And in fact, in many cases, you have the police with the rioters who are carrying flags associated with the BJP as they are engaged in mob violence. And in the run-up to the election, there were at least 2 incidents in which people fired guns at demonstrators while the police looked as bystanders would, without taking any action. And all of these people were seen to be from so-called fringe organizations connected to the Hindu far right. So I can't see how the BJP cannot be associated with this violence.
And critics of Modi would say that his discrimination of Muslims, the minority in India, goes far beyond the Citizenship Act. Could you tell us what the substance of these claims are, those who accuse him of trying to marginalize the country's Muslim minority?
Well, the world seems to have forgotten, but Mr. Modi's path to power when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat comes via a path of highly orchestrated violence and hate speech against Muslims, in particular in the state of Gujarat in 2002. He has a record of hate speech against Muslims going all the way up to 2010 or 11 when he made his image into a modernizer and as a development man. If you look at the party platform that the BJP has, which goes back to their documents of the 1930s, they basically have an explicit agenda to declare Muslims to be the second-class citizens of India, who will only be able to live as they say explicitly once again, at the mercy of the majority community. So if you look at some of the actions that Mr. Modi has taken after he has come back to power in 2019, blocking off Kashmir from all communications and the reduction of Kashmir from a state to a union territory. There is no government outside of the central government in Kashmir. They have no political representation at the moment. The second thing is you have the Supreme Court verdict in favor of the BJP in the case of the destruction of the Babri Masjid, where the court ruled that evidence must bow down to the faith and belief of the majority community. Then you have the Citizens Amendment Act, where basically it is supposed to be for asylum to non-Muslims from neighboring countries. But when you put that together with the National Register for Citizens, that basically becomes a very ominous thing for poor Muslims who do not have documentation to prove that they are citizens of India, because so far even the passport or the national identity card has been declared to be not sufficient proof for becoming, for being a citizen of India. There are two other things coming along the way. One of them is a population law, because they believe that Muslims have a greater number of children than Hindus do. So to basically punish people who have more than 2 children. And at the end of all of that, they have in plan something called the Uniform Civil Code, by which they mean that Hindu family law will become the universal law for all other communities in India.